committing more U.S. troops to the war, rising oil and gas prices, and the overall impact on the economy, plus the Homeland Security stalemate in Congress, and a Democrat flips a local Florida House seat with redistricting in Florida just weeks away. Exclusive WPBF 25 political analysts go on the record right now.
From WPBF 25, this is On the Record with Todd McDermott.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We welcome our exclusive political analysts, former Florida Chief Financial Officer Jeff Atwater, former Congressman Ron Klein, also both former members of the Florida legislature. We'll talk more about that in a little while. Let's start with the war in Iran. It's a pretty simple question with a complex answer. And Jeff, I'll start with you. Is President Trump right now, with what's going on, is he damaging the Republican Party at all with any lasting damage for the future elections?
Well, I don't think, Todd, the answer is lasting. I think that there's enough people who see this as this was a necessity, a real threat to not only the Middle East, but to really, a peace beyond that in the move of commerce and particularly of oil. So I believe people will see it as necessary, but I do believe in the near term people are war weary, and that. And I think it might have shown. We'll get to it a little bit later in some of the election and polling that's taking place right now. That people want to see an answer. And when the gas prices started moving, I think that certainly has put a little damper on the enthusiasm.
And I want to actually point out that polling shows that the majority of Republicans do support this war at this point, and that includes especially those who are self-identified as MAGA. But the number seems to be perhaps eroding some. So I'll pose the same question to Ron, and that is this damaging the president's allies more than anybody else, at least at this point?
I think, depending how long this lasts, it could have a lasting impact into the fall, which is, it seems like a long time away. It really isn't. And between the economy sort of faltering, gas prices as high as they are, and it's not going to happen overnight. Gas prices go up fast, they don't go down as fast. And so depending on how much infrastructure in the Middle East is damaged, rebuilding all that refinery activity and things like that, depending on when the Straits of Hormuz hopefully opens soon. But again, it's going to take time. And there's a lot of instability that is created out of this, not to mention higher costs of not just the oil, the gas that's coming across, and all the inputs that go into fertilizer and a lot of other things that affect consumer products and agriculture.
All right, clearly, this is an opinion question for both of you. Ron, I'll start with you. Do you believe the president is relying on some faulty advice or advice that perhaps there might be misinformation about this war in general? This is not capturing Maduro in Venezuela, swooping in. This is not that surgical strike on Iranian nuclear facilities last year. This is far more complex. Is it possible he is getting the wrong information from some of his team?
It's possible. I mean, when I was in Congress and I worked on Iran and the Middle East, I was well aware, as everyone else was, the Straits of Hormuz is a choke point. I mean, if that's closed, like the Suez Canal, when it gets closed, there's a choke point on oil. So this is not a surprise. If he, for some reason, was either led to believe or on his own thought that maybe it was going to be a quick in and out kind of deal, I think that's bad information. Our military has performed excellently, as we would expect, but it's much more than air shots that take care of it. If the goal was to regime change, that was not going to happen easily. If it was getting rid of the nuclear threat, they have done nothing with that at this point. If it was reducing ballistic missiles, I think they had made some success on that. But in terms of how you get in, how do you get out, and the impact in the region, I think that he's making a lot of judgments himself. It's sort of the way Donald Trump operates. It keeps people off balance, but that's not the way it works in a worldwide crisis like this.
Well, as we're speaking today, there are shifting messages about where we stand on the war. There are shifting messages about whether we're going to hit Iran harder, whether there's going to be an agreement, whether we are actually negotiating or not in this case. But Jeff, I got to ask you politically, does this actually turn Americans' attention away from some of these domestic challenges that the administration has right now?
I don't think it will turn it away. I think we see these elections, and particularly midterms, are going to be about where we stand as Americans. They still have to address issues of affordability and the like, but I do believe that that the advice he's getting is probably very, very sound. I think that the communication could have been from the outset, not that this is going to be over in a weekend, or not that what we've done in a couple of days is going to take care of it. As was said, Ron put it, the strait is critical. These individuals are not going to roll over. It's going to take a tremendous amount of continued effort to finally address the nuclear, which is the key, and that's going to take probably some additional resources. But I think he had to do this in the layers that he's doing it. Knock out leadership, knock out defense, knock out ballistic, before you can really address the other.
Can we go back to a second for what the stated goals were, because those have been shifting. And Ron, you mentioned them, but is it regime change? Is it the president co-leading Iran? What's the best outcome for the U.S. in terms of the shifting goals we've heard about, the reason we went to war with Iran?
Well, shifting goals are a problem. It's one thing not to go to Congress, which as a former member of Congress, I would have appreciated the opportunity to say yes or no, or at least be prepared and understand that. But he never made the case to the American people. That's a problem. And by the way, President Bush previously, even in wars we didn't like, he built a coalition of partners all over the world that went in and participated. This is Israel and America alone. I understand Israel's position. Israel's directly threatened, as a neighbor, with nuclear threats and everything else. The question is, why is the United States in there at the same time? It's a big question, and the case has not been really made clearly. So the shifting sands make it all much weaker in terms of understanding how, why, where, and what do we end up with at the end?
Well, let me get into that with Jeff. Do you see Israel and the U.S. as having, if not countering goals here in this war, different goals into the outcome of this war?
I think there's no doubt that Israel is looking for a regime change that could become a neighbor that people can work with and rely upon and have an honest relationship with, rather than this constant threat of harassment and far worse. But I do believe from the American side that it's very clear, this is very different. This is not someone going into Kuwait with conventional weapons and us having time to create a coalition. This is someone sitting with the potential for nuclear warheads that he's now shown us, or whatever the regime is at the moment has shown us, could put one of those in the middle of Europe, in some of the European capitals.
Because of the warheads there.
Because of the warheads. So I think the communication clarity would be, this has to be dealt with, in whether it's alone or with Israel or with, and I believe others will eventually get in there with us. It has to be addressed on the risk side of a nuclear force.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. On the Record returns in just a moment.
You're watching On the Record on WPBF 25.
Welcome back. We continue our discussion with our WPBF 25 news political analyst, Jeff Atwater, Ron Klein. Let's move from the war in Iran to the president's domestic agenda right now. And some of it's obviously tied to the war. We mentioned it in the first segment. That is gas prices, oil prices. Inflation is not down. In fact, there are now some indications from some independent analysts that we're going to see higher inflation this year. Let's go back to politics. The president isn't up for re-election. He's in the second year of his second term. What can Republicans do to mitigate any damage they might see? And again, admitting that the election is more than 200 days away.
But coming fast. But coming fast, and people will begin to settle into their opinions. I think that's going to happen, and I think for Republicans, you have to accept the two things. One is, this is a midterm year with yourself in the White House, or your party in the White House. It's going to be a headwinds anyway. With this war, I believe that you're going to see, as we call it, higher for longer, those interest rates. And I think gas prices, as again Ron astutely addressed, is being built into a lot of costs. So I think it's going to be very difficult. I think that the Republicans are just going to have to press in on these things that we have in the underlying economy. When we can put this behind us, and that's a reach, when we can put this behind us, the underlying earnings that are taking place along the broader economy are still strong, and there is optimism that when this gets behind us, things should begin to move strong. And I think the sooner the better that we can put to rest the issue of war.
And that's part of the message from the White House is,
right,
we get beyond this and then the good times roll. The question is, how long and what is beyond this? Ron, how big a price could Democrats or Republicans pay in November if we are where we are today, or we see economic deterioration between now and then?
I was in Washington this week for some meetings and ran into a number of my Republican friends from Congress, and they're concerned for the reasons that Jeff mentioned: headwinds, normal off-year election. President Trump is not on the ballot. but he is ever present. So midterm elections are very much about a measurement of the success or failure of the party in power. In this case, it's not even a split, one House of Congress is D and one is R. It's the Republicans are in charge. So whatever happens, it's your deal, okay? It's good, it's your deal. If it's bad, it's your deal. So I think that part of the argument Democrats are going to make at a minimum is we need a check and balance in the government. So elections are about checks and balances sometimes, of say, hey, President Trump may not be wrong on everything, but you got to at least recognize sometimes there are things that need a check and balance. So I think it's very likely there's going to be a pushback on Republicans, and we'll see.
I want to address another domestic issue, and that is ICE migrant sweeps that have been going on across the country, obviously very controversial. Jeff, what do you make of the fact that we're not seeing the shock and awe type actions in American cities now? We see ICE agents in airports mostly doing crowd control, unmasked. What do you make of that change? Is this all a conscious effort by the White House to maybe change the perception some?
Todd, I believe, was clearly a conscious effort. I think even though it was clearly stated this was his agenda, among other things, and he has pursued those things aggressively, that the reaction that came out of particularly Minnesota, that I think it was a check. Look, let's go about everything that we can do, but let's hold back on the aggressive nature that was causing all the pushback in the streets and the bedlam in the streets, and in highlighting the successes that are taking place in other cities and in other places where there is cooperation and there's partnerships. And I think, and whether how it's going to be reporting tragedies that are occurring in some of these places, none of us want to see that. And hopefully everyone can sit down at some point and agree to find a better collaborative relationships rather than us returning at some point possibly to the raids that you saw.
We know this partial government shutdown was about funding DHS, specifically ICE, and the Democrats' demand for reforms, no masks, body cameras, et cetera. As we speak, the president has issued an executive order to pay TSA agents, which is a big sticking point right now for Americans in air travel, and also all those federal workers who've been unpaid. But does this solve anything? Is this a kick down the can type thing to pay TSA now? Because it doesn't resolve the differences the parties have between the Democrats and Republicans when it comes to ICE tactics and procedures.
That's correct, Todd. It doesn't. And I think that to the extent more bad things happen, unfortunately, if they do, I mean, with the size of operation, things happen. Americans didn't want that. I mean, listen, if Donald Trump was measured on closing the borders and deporting criminals, he probably would have gotten an A by most Americans. That's not what they did, though. They did close borders, for sure, but the way they approached the streets and putting troops in there, and a lot of people are concerned that they're going to try to screw around with the elections. This is like setting a stage for something like that. I hope not. I mean, that's not the way we operate in America. We want free and fair elections. But a lot of people are very frightened by that, and I think there was a very rough and appropriate reaction by Americans to say enough. And so I think, yes, the fact that the masks are coming down and things like that are very, very much the way it should be. And hopefully the failure of not paying them will come back. And now the fact that TSA is getting paid, we still have FEMA, we still have Coast Guard, we have a bunch of things, and members of Congress need to get back there and finish it.
All right, next, two very unlikely shifts in political seats in the state of Florida. We'll talk about the races last week when On the Record comes back. We're back to talk Florida politics, starting with Democrat Emily Guthrie's surprising win in the special election, Florida House District 87. You've heard this by now. She flipped it from red back to blue. It was a 19-point Republican win when it was redistricted. That was 2024. Should I ask the Democratic congressman, former first? How big a deal is it?
It's a big deal. I mean, Florida's been much more Republican because of the way the districts have drawn, population has changed a little bit. And Democratic parties has struggled in Florida, and I can say that as a Democrat. But this was probably one that was just gets into the basics. She talked about affordability in Palm Beach County. It's a real deal here. And the fact that President Trump, supported her opponent, so what? I mean, she said, I just stuck with the issues, and I think she did a very good job of it. It is symbolic. Independent voters are speaking. And
it does look like it was an independent voter type win. Jeff, is this a canary in the coal mine, or is this an outlier?
I think it's reason for concern. Clearly, it's reason for concern. I think there are people that, and by the way, I don't want to take anything away from the candidates. They both worked it very hard, and they deserve credit.
And it was a close race.
It was a close race, and they should be proud of the way they handled themselves. They really worked it hard. I do believe from polling that we've had access to that there was a clear change in independent mindsets, the NPAs we refer to historically as independent voter, once the incursion, the war began. And so I don't want to, again, take anything away from the candidates in the local, but I think that is where you need to be thinking a longer-term concern for Republicans going into the summer months, putting to bed the efforts to try to address the Middle East concerns.
Here's the big difference between here in Palm Beach County, we're about one-third, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Let's go to the Tampa area and that state Senate race to replace Senator Collins that Brian Nathan apparently has won in a district that is very red. They had a 22,000 vote advantage, Republicans. He was outspent 3-1. Is that more worrisome for Florida Republicans than even this one?
It would be, because I think, to your point, he did not spend the money that people thought the Republican had spent, and maybe saw that it spent, and I think that again lays that groundwork. You need to address concerns here and now that this overlying midterm is going to be of concern unless we can get a message out there.
All right, real quick, Ron, do you have any other union leader candidates who are ex-Navy guys who run on the Democratic side?
You never know. They're looking for him right now.
Yeah,
no, but
sure
I think there is a point there. You know, he spent no money. He was not a strong candidate. Came out of nowhere. The party didn't really get behind him in any big way. And here he won this race. And by the way, the numbers are showing more Republicans voted than Democrats. Just hard-odd number. It's telling you a lot about non-NPA numbers.
That was,
Independents
that was
right.
kind of a shock.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about redistricting because we have to. I'm going to make you guys do a whole show about this after the fact. But we're going to see redistricting in the legislature next month, a special session called by the governor. I just really want to know first, and Jeff, I'll start with you. What do you see happening? Are we going to have congressional candidates we know in our area who are in danger, Democratic candidates, obviously, sitting people in Congress? Are there seats that are going to be lost because of this?
I think those seats are going to. First off, Todd, I think if they try to get too aggressive with this, they're going to make a mistake. It's a headwinds year. You dilute these districts in a way that you think you've just got a little bit of an advantage. We've just seen two examples we've spoken of.
Right.
You're going to get a surprise. So if you get too aggressive, you're going to end up disappointing yourself. But I do believe that the districts that we may see here in South Florida, we're familiar with, names we're familiar with, those seats will probably, one or two of them will become more competitive.
All right, Ron, who's the most danger in our area?
Probably Sherfless McCormick. It's Broward, Palm Beach County. It's a district that was sort of encouraged based on the population, an African American. Elsie Hastings was there for a long time, did a wonderful job, and she came in, and I'd say that that's a district that the legislature could play around with, try to split it up and jam more Democrats in Democratic seats and try to create a Republican seat. And there may be a seat in Orlando that may try to run two Democrats. But I agree with Jeff. If they get too aggressive and there's a real pushback of election where the Republican brand is shot, people just vote against or they don't show up, that's math. And that's when one party wins.
I've got about a minute left. We all know, I think the public generally knows, that the president is looking for more seats to protect, to maintain that majority in Congress, which is obviously always in danger in a midterm. Jeff, is there a chance Republicans can run the table here and keep from losing the House majority, a really good chance?
I think it's the headwinds are up against them to hold on to that majority. I really do. I think I would be surprised, and I would like to be pleasantly surprised in November that they hold on to the House.
I'm thinking otherwise. No, it's a very small number. It's 3, 4, whatever the number is. And you get to that, I didn't serve mine were 20, 30, something like that. It doesn't take much to change. And with headwinds, I don't think it's going to be a huge number. There's only 30, 40 seats out of 435 that are available, but it's a small number.
All right, the analysts, Ron Klein, Jeff Atwater, just analyzed. I'm having you back as soon as possible. On the record, we'll be right back. A reminder, you can watch this morning's episode of On the Record and every episode on our website, WPBF.com, and on our free news app. And we hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Thanks for joining us. See you again next week.